not enough because of politics. Joining me right now, a member of the Senate Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committees, Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator Rubio, welcome back to the program. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
What do you think really happened here?
Well, first of all, I think the Democrats have spent 2 years, they've built their entire political messaging around the notion that Donald Trump is not a legitimate president because Russia got him elected. They put all their faith in an investigation that they were confident was going to prove they were right, and it didn't happen. And so now they're having kind of a public temper tantrum. In essence, we don't like what the investigation found, so turn over everything that you did to us so we can comb through it and pull out any little nugget that we can then amplify and turn and twist to reach some conclusion that we don't like. In essence, they don't want to win at the ballot box next November. They want to figure out a way to try to disqualify the president since they're not happy with the outcome of this investigation. So I think what you saw, the sound the president said, it's absolutely right. No matter what you give them, they're going to continue to claim that it's not enough, that there's more there somewhere. A lot of these people have a lot of egg on their face, you know, so I'm sure it's part of it is that too.
Senator, I mean, what happened to leadership? What happened to having some kind of conviction for yourself? What happened to, you know, the America that wouldn't rush to judgment here? I mean, you know, and we're going to talk about Venezuela in a minute. I spent a lot of time on these Latin American dictatorships, Venezuela specifically. And when I look at the politics, the pure raw politics surrounding this whole Mueller probe, I can't help but be reminded of some of the bad things that we've seen play out politically in some pretty bad places. I mean, this doesn't seem like an America that we can trust the way we would think we could.
Yeah, so first of all, I don't think there's any doubt that Russia under Putin has tried to sow division in America, and they continue to do it, and they do it here, and they do it in other parts of the world as well. That is different from what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here basically is that one of the major political parties and many people in the media who basically implied or flat out said that the President of the United States was involved in treason, in coordinating an election with a foreign power, okay? The fact that that is not the case should be something that we should all be happy about. Republican or Democrat, the notion that our president was not involved in treason or anything of the sort is something that we should be joyful about. And there's plenty of other things you can disagree with them on. But instead, they were cheering for there to be treason, which would have been terrible news for the country, as it turned out not to be true. They don't want to accept that fact because they thought for sure that that was going to be the magic, you know, solution that was going to get them back into the White House and a majority in the Senate. And I imagine now they're just sort of spinning in disappointment. And it's unfortunate because it is doing damage to the country. And by the way, it's helping Putin achieve his goal of further dividing us.
Yeah, they're doing his job for him, for sure.
That's right.
Let me switch gears because many of the Democrats now running for the 2020 nomination, some of them, your colleagues in the Senate, have signaled their openness to expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court. I know you're tackling this issue head on here by introducing a constitutional amendment limiting the high court to 9 justices. Why does this need protection right now?
Well, first of all, because of the claims that they're making, we need stability in our institutions. And so the idea that any time that somebody doesn't like the composition of the Supreme Court, you can step in and add or subtract members from it to get the outcome you want would be so destabilizing to us. I mean, for that reason, why don't we just add 3 senators to every state? You know, why don't we have 2 instead of, why don't we have 3 instead of 2 senators in every state? Why don't we add 2 members of Congress per district? Where does this end? If you simply can say, well, I don't like the way some major institution, in this case a third branch of government, is currently constructed, so let me just add more people to it so I can get the result. I mean, that is incredibly destabilizing to our institutions, and so it's important to enshrine that in the Constitution, and I'm not surprised that Democrats want to change it. One of the great achievements that this administration has had working with the Senate is changing the federal judiciary, putting people back on there now, young judges, by the way, who are people that are going to apply the Constitution according to its original intent, not creatively manipulate it. And they know they're facing 20 years of this sort of jurist. And so they're thinking, let's change that. Let's change it. Let's add more people to it and dilute the influence of those recent nominations and appointments. And but it's, again, I think it's harmful to our institutions.
Have you seen this move before? This feels like kind of a new one here. I know that they want to make 2020 effectively, you know, a referendum on the court. But this seems to me to be a political move or something up their sleeve that we haven't quite seen before, perhaps because the circumstances haven't quite warranted it. They haven't been in a situation where the makeup of the court has been drastically changed and not in their favor.
Yeah, so I think obviously we're in the midst of a presidential campaign. You got 1,000 people running on the Democratic side, and everyone out there has got to figure out what creative idea far to the left can they come up with in order to stand out in a crowded field. And so I think you heard this, you heard Medicare for all, you've heard, obviously the single payer system, Medicare for all. You've heard all kinds of talk about reparations. I forgot the Green New Deal. I mean, every significant, they are continuing to move the ball further and further to the left, and I'm sure it gets huge applause lines at these town halls and rallies around the country that are populated by activists from the left. But these are not things that the everyday Americans across the country, in its vast majority, are excited about or thinking about or in support of. And I think they continue to move further and further away from middle America and the vast majority of the people of this country.
And ultimately that hurts them.
Absolutely.
There's somebody else that changed the Constitution that I can think of, and that happens to be Mr. Hugo Chavez down in Venezuela. And he changed it back in the late 1990s and was able to remake the Supreme Court in a way that he saw fit. And we know how that all played out, and we're watching it deteriorate significantly right now as I speak. Tonight in Venezuela, still large parts of the country without power, and the people, in many cases, not having food, not having water. The basics really to survive. They're obviously hugely frustrated, hugely upset. The majority that I speak to do not want socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro there, and yet, Senator, he's still there. What is it going to take for him to leave?
Well, a couple things. First of all, we have to stop talking about and thinking about Maduro's regime as a government. They're not a government. Governments provide basic services. They don't provide basic services. There's no water. There's no food. There's an outbreak now of hepatitis A because people are having to drink open sewage and contaminated rivers. Today, we saw the desperation play out on the border region with Colombia, where hundreds of people overran a National Guard post to get in and back, get out of Venezuela into Colombia to buy things and then come back out. He's relying on criminal street gangs in order to go after protesters. They are not a government. The Maduro regime is an organized crime organization. It's a crime syndicate, and that's how we have to think of it. So they have to be broken up the way you break up a mafia, and that is you get them eventually to turn against themselves until someone comes forward and strikes a deal on their behalf and at the expense of the others. And there's plenty of buzz like that going around. But look, anytime that you are taking on a organized crime ring that is willing to kill their own people, starve their own people, and do atrocious things, not because they care about their country, but because they want to hold on to power, you have to have a little bit of patience. It's easy for us to say because we're not going through that suffering. But it's been 10 weeks now. 10 weeks since Juan Guaido assumed the presidency. You're taking on something that's been in place for over a decade with deep roots, deeply entrenched, now with the assistance of Russia and China and Iran and Turkey and Cuba. And it's going to take some time. But the Maduro regime does not survive. There's no doubt about it. It's taken too long already, but it will happen. It's just a question of time, and it's, as I said, the sooner the better.
So I might as well just ask you this so we can clear the air and get it out of the way. But Nicolas Maduro blames you, sir, and the U.S. government for the electricity shortages. What do you say to that?
Well, they're clowns, obviously, and I think the scary part is he may actually personally believe it. The people around him know it's not true. They're making excuses. Sometimes these dictators get isolated and out of touch with reality. The bottom line is they didn't invest any money to maintain an electric grid, none. And they'd lost a bunch of people that knew how to fix it as well. And so, of course, it's going to break down. That's what's happened. They don't have the technical capability to repair it. You will continue to see these blackouts for the foreseeable future, and every time one of them happens, it further damages the infrastructure, making it even harder to restore. They're not a government. They stole all of that money. This is what happens when you steal all the money and you don't invest it back into basic government services. You have societal breakdown, civil disorder. That's what the situation is in Venezuela today, and there's only one person responsible for it, Nicolas Maduro and the people around him who have made this possible. They're
looking to us for help. At what point do we say, okay, enough? We need to intervene in a way that makes sure that the humanitarian aid gets to the actual people of Venezuela.
Well, look, people can go around complaining about it all they want. The one who makes this decision is the President of the United States, and he's been very clear that there are virtually no options that he won't consider. The administration is working through an escalatory chain of events to support the legitimate government of Juan Guaido, As of now, we are doing everything they've asked. We've gotten incredible global recognition. The sanctions, people think of the sanctions as a one-time event. Sanctions are cumulative. They didn't sell oil today. They're not going to sell oil tomorrow. They didn't sell oil yesterday. They are running out of hard currency and the ability to bribe each other because there's no loyalty to Maduro. This is not ideological loyalty. This is theft and graft and access to ill-gotten gains. And the less of it he's able to provide, the less reason some of these people have to stick with him. So something will break. I think the administration is pursuing the right course of action. It takes some time. Again, it's only been 10 weeks. I know it seems like 10 years that we've been going through this. Juan Guaido's been in place for 10 weeks. Tremendous courage on his behalf. We stand with him 100%.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear. And I know you've been right out in front of this story from the beginning. Thank you, Senator Rubio.